Peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
Good morning, viewers. Thank you very much for watching us from the Africa Command Center. Thank you very much. Good morning, Africa. Good morning, wherever you are in the world. Thank you very much. This is Punchline Africa Television, broadcasting to you across the continent of Africa. I am Dr. David Matanga. Thank you. And across in Nairobi, Kenya, Miriam Ogutu. Good morning.
Hello, good morning to you, good morning to our panelists, and good morning to our viewers.
Thank you very much, all the panelists. Sharon, Samuel, Daniel, thank you very much. This is Diplomatic Leaks, a show that comes out in Africa that looks at events that take place on the continent, behind the diplomatic lines, and we see. Today's topic is very simple, a topic of peace and military coups. Across Africa, Miriam and the panel, all of you, something has changed. A new wave of military and militarism is sweeping the continent of Africa. A new wave of instigated external pressured coups are taking place in Africa. A new wave of paid mercenaries are assassinating presidents, killing presidents, dismembering states across Africa. A new wave of paid up NGOs, civil society uprisings, organization of public revolt, organizations paid, funded logistically by George Soros. It is coming to a reality today that George Soros pays, equips, supplies most of the people with new mechanisms, money to overthrow governments on the continent of Africa. It is also very clear now from the events of the conflicts that have taken place in Africa, Miriam, that when you look at Cape Delgado of Mozambique, a few weeks ago was on fire, was hot. I want to thank President Kagame intervened, and he was told by the French to intervene, and he took over 2,000 troops, ran these troops in Mozambique. We don't hear about the conflict anymore. Do you report about it, Miriam? The conflict is gone and forgotten. But who was the mastermind of this conflict in Cape Delgado? Total Oil. Across Africa, Total Oil is instigating coups in all French-speaking countries. Coups are the basis of today. In those moderate English-speaking countries like Sudan, which speaks both English and Arabic, colonized both by Arabs and English, the coup is still about oil. Who will run the oil rich? Yesterday, a failed coup took place in Khartoum. Miriam has got the details of the coup, and I think you'll take it from there. A few weeks back, there was a coup in Guinea-Conakry. A few months back, there was a coup in Mali. We don't know where it is coming next, but I know, I can tell you for sure there will be a coup in Nigeria before Buhari ends his term. Because there are difficulties. What causes coups? What makes military coups occur, return to our politics? In the 1960s, after Africa got independence, we were struck by the first coup in 1965 of Kwame Nkrumah, who was overthrown by his own relatives, while he was on an official visit in Russia. Thinking of all these difficulties, you can now come to a conclusion that east or west, there is someone somewhere who is paying the coup plotters. That there is someone somewhere who wants a coup to take place in an African country. That there is someone somewhere who wants a conflict to be triggered in African countries. There is someone somewhere who sits down and wants the troops of the bigger nations to be active. If you look at the point of Somalia and Kenya, Miriam, as we speak right now, the Somalia and the Kenya conflict that is going to range in the ICJ, it will create a conflict. But how many people are willing and ready to listen to us, the advice that we want to give Miriam? It is very clear that the advice that one would get is to ask the United Nations Security Council to defer the case of Kenya and the Somalia maritime border dispute until further notice. There are so many things to be acted on. Those islands have stayed there for millions and millions of years. The oil blocks have been there since God created us. Isn't it, Miriam? We don't know when, we don't know how, we don't know how much is there. We only estimate. But Miriam, I want to tell you, why are we rushing to demarcate the border today? These are some of the reasons why I brought this topic this morning for us and the panel to see, to engage, to talk, to submerge themselves into the furies. You come into the furies, you are embedded in the fury of saying somewhere in the metros, someone pays for this coup. Miriam, the coup, failed coup in Sudan was coming. A few months ago when we talked, I told you there would be, I was giving who sponsors chaos in Africa. A certain lady from Khartoum by name, I think you remember her name. I don't know whether you can research, Dr. Sir Mohammed somebody from Khartoum told us openly that they are afraid. There are so many militias in Khartoum at the moment. Whose militias are these? Who sponsors the militias? Who is benefiting out of the militias? The generals in Khartoum, one of the problems which will trigger a coup is for them to say they are handing over Mr. Bashir to the ICC. Definitely there will be a coup. Definitely the people will stand up to oppose. Definitely some soldiers are not happy because there are people who took part in the full war. And I don't think, Miriam, people are happy to see their general being humiliated, having been thrown out and humiliated. Then you want to hand him over to the international community, to ICC to slaughter. So there will be another coup. There will be so many coups. That is a reason why there will be another coup in Sudan. Another thing which you must come out and say the truth. A country like Nigeria today, Nigeria is killing people. Nigeria state is hammering down people, killing people. What do you do with them? What do you do? Buhari has lost the grip over Nigeria. The Biafrans are crying day and in and out that they need a referendum, which Buhari is not giving them. So such a dangerous situation brings us quite a lot of difficulties for now. So for me, I believe that a military coup comes because there are people who are dissatisfied. There are extensions of the constitution. There is a third way of people doing things. We have allowed inequality, equity of distribution. I will borrow the word of the Sharon, equity, equitably. Sharon used that word. And now Sharon here is where you can use the word equitable distribution of resources can also create military coups. The hardships on the ground. So Miriam, just give us a background, then we start the journey. That is my overview.
All right, thank you so much. What I have with me is just a reminder of the recent coups that have taken place here in the continent, starting from 2017. And before that, we know there are a couple of others that took place in Africa. But in 2017, there was a coup d'etat in Zimbabwe after military movements are seen and explosions heard in government districts in northern Harare. The ZDF takes over state television and says that President Mugabe is in custody, but denies mounting a coup. And on November 21st of the same year, the coup ended with the resignation of the late President Robert Mugabe. Then in 2019, there was an attempted coup d'etat in Gabon, and Gabonese soldiers seized the national radio and television station, declaring the establishment of a restoration council. The plotters were soon arrested by the Gabonese government, and of course they were killed. And at that time, I think the Gabonese president Bongo was seeking treatment. Was it in Morocco or this, in one of those countries up in the north? And then in 2019, Sudanese coup d'etat that removed a former president, led by a former first vice president, attacked the presidential palace and overthrew the president and his government, resulting in the new government being formed. And in 2019, there was a coup d'etat in Ethiopia, an attempted coup d'etat in Ethiopia. 2020 and 21, Central African Republic, there's been coup d'etats there several times. And in 2021, that is this year, we've seen the Mali coup, we've seen the Guinea coup, and now the attempted coup in Sudan. And the latest is that there was a failed attempt to overthrow the country's transitional government, blaming a military officer and civilians from former government of dispossessed President Omar al-Bashir. They're the ones who are being said to have organized that coup, attempted coup. So, Doc, those are just some of the recent coups or attempted coups that we've seen take place in the continent.
Thank you very much, Miriam. Now we come down to the truth. When did the rain start beating us? Let me pick the minds of Tawish. What happens? Why are we coming back to 1960 yet we are going to 2021? Tawish.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Masanga, David. Thank you, colleague panelist, and Miriam at the main headquarters. Indeed, Dr. Masanga, I mean, Africa continent today, and most African countries today are actually experiencing the coups that indeed Miriam has mentioned, and one that you have highlighted. And I think the reason could be is that we could be having a fresh scramble for the African continent, a fresh attempt to want to have a control of the African continent. And Dr. Masanga, the moment we began having the civil society organizations, most of which are being funded by the George Soros foundations, is the time when we began having these problems in the African continent. Because, Dr. Masanga, these civil society organizations disguise themselves as maybe championing the interests of the people, trying to help the African countries, of course, address some of the challenges that these individual countries face from time to time. But when you have a keener look, Dr. Masanga, onto some of the activities of these civil society organizations, you get to understand that most of them are geared towards really destabilizing governments, bringing down governments. And I think that is what we have experienced, like a case we are seeing today in Sudan. You've talked about Ethiopian attempted coup. And I think, Dr. Masanga, when you oust from power a leader like Omar al-Bashir, without really looking onto the ideology that this leader has had or impacted on the people and more so the military in that particular country, then you will not be expecting that the remnants of Omar al-Bashir will be sitting pretty and watching their man being destroyed. And the moment we get to understand how we have dignified exit for the leaders who have served as presidents or prime ministers in these respective African countries, then Dr. Masanga, that is where the problem begins. Look at how, for example, Mugabe was removed from power. Look into how, for example, Cyril Ramaphosa removed that particular, was it Jacob Zuma in South Africa? Look into what is happening today in Khartoum. Do those countries have any peace? Look into what happened in Libya when, of course, the president of that particular country was removed from power. Those nations or countries have never known or seen peace ever since such kind of things indeed happen in those respective countries. So, Dr. Masanga, I concur with you and, of course, the panel that the civil society organizations are working hand in hand with external forces, and in this case, the George Soros-funded foundations to destabilize African nations and bring down regimes that are not actually taking the cue from whatever kind of interest they want to have on the African continent. For now, Dr. Masanga, I submit.
Atawish, before you go and before a doctor comes in, I think in that list I forgot the coup that happened in Algeria in 2019 that removed President Abdelaziz Bouteflika. There's something you've said there about a dignified exit. How do you give a dignified exit to somebody who does not even want to exit at all? How does that happen?
Yes, ma'am. I think the problem we are having is that, one, we need to appreciate the fact that these leaders have served their time and they have created what I will refer as an ideology amongst the populace, most of their followers. And also we look into the military, for example, because there's no way you can separate the military or the security apparatus and the regime that was, or even the presidents that are, the leadership that is there. So in itself, Dr. Miriam, you get to understand that there's some sort of allegiance that this head of security apparatus normally have on the heads of state or those, for example, the prime ministers or presidents of respective countries. So if you oust these leaders from power without quite giving them a dignified kind of exit, regardless. Because I understand there are people who argue, for example, President Museveni of Uganda, as I would say, is stay in power, Mugabe when he was in power, and we've given so many of other examples like what happened in the Gambia when that president did not want to leave office, and we also what exactly happened in that particular country. But again, if you give a dignified kind of exit for a leader, take a Kenyan example, Miriam. When President Moi was in power for almost about 24 years, if I'm not very wrong, and there are so many people who felt maybe he did not or he ruled with an iron fist, that probably his regime was that which oppressed the voice of dissent and such kind of things. So you could imagine President Kibaki, who succeeded him, coming and began witch hunt or following President Moi then. What would have happened to the supporters? What would have happened from maybe to the community that that particular leader really comes from? There are times we really need to strike a compromise. There are times we need to let bygones be bygones and not really try to poke holes into to the past instances, because when we do that, the ripple effect is what we are feeling or what we are seeing today in the African continent. So I agree largely, Miriam, that also leaders should be persuaded to understand that when their time comes, they need to exit honorably. But again, we do not want to have what I see as witch hunt or something that looks like vendetta, trying to pay back for whatever ills that these leaders have committed while in power. Sometimes it happens, but we need to have a heart of forgiving so that for the continuity of the country, to allow, people to continue living together in peace and harmony. I submit, Miriam.
Very well. Doc, back to you. Okay, I guess I'll bring in Sharon. Sharon Gitonga, I'm sure you are familiar with the recent coup in Sudan and the ones that have taken place in the recent past in the continent. And sometimes one gets to wonder, because I think these coups, they all differ and as the reasons as to why and why they took place and things like that. Has it become an unnecessary evil in the continent?
Okay, thank you very much, Miriam and my co-panelist. Yeah. For me, I think my biggest question from the coup attempt that failed, in Sudan, is that who are these plotted? Who are these people that plotted these the happenings of yesterday? And what is the reason? What is the reason behind this? And I think Tawish has just answered my biggest concern, which was, could they be the President Omar's remnants? So I think for me that is my biggest question when as I follow this conversation. And to leaders, I don't know if maybe they can. For me, what I would say for the leaders, if they can put their their best foot forward to bringing the said plotters. I saw they were able to arrest 21 military officers. So if they could also bring the remaining ones on board, for the sake of stability and peace. Thank you.
Okay, Doctor, back to you, Doc.
There is Daniel Wesonga.
Farewell, Daniel.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Matsanga David. And of course, when we look at coups in Africa, this in the recent past has become a very, very prevalent and pivotal issue, even as we hold a discussion today. Barely weeks ago, we had a coup in Guinea. The other month, we had another one in Mali. And this has been quite a problem, especially in the French-speaking countries. And if it were not for the Rwandan military and the leadership of Rwanda to send troops in Mozambique, perhaps right now we could be staring at another coup, as Dr. Matsanga says. And now, when we come back to the coup that happened in Sudan, Miriam, I believe this was a coup which was orchestrated by the outside forces through the few individuals in the government and the military of President Omar al-Bashir. And these are coups that left a sharply divided country. Actually, it is a country which was divided right in the middle. And that tells you that as we have one side of the plotters, half of the country celebrating about the coup, we have another half which is actually disgruntled and looking forward on how they can be able to redeem their lost glory. And also, I think the leadership that took over power after the coup in Sudan did not handle the situation as delicate as it was quite in a right way. When you are taking someone who has been in power for quite a long time to The Hague, when you are persecuting those people who are close to him, be very sure that his supporters, both in government and outside government, will actually get up to arms and be able to maybe counterattack such a strategy. And that is what perhaps could have occasioned the coup, the failed coup that happened in Khartoum the other day. Because you've seen the kind of intimidation, the kind of humiliation former President Omar al-Bashir has been taken through. And mind you, this is a leader who has been connecting for all those years that he has been in leadership. He has been having a wide network of individuals who are friends, who are colleagues, and who are actually his ardent supporters. And that was so much anticipated to happen. But however, as we talk about the coups in Africa, Tarwish brought in a very, very important angle in it, that we do have foreign interference, people who keep on telling the citizenry and also errant individuals in the military that, look, your government is not doing this and that, therefore you could raise up to arms and be able to overthrow it. And that has been actually counterproductive, because when you look at the chronology and the history of countries which have been bedeviled by coups, these are countries which are still struggling. Look at what happened in Libya. Look at what happened in Mali, in Chad, and all other African countries. And even when you go back into the books of history, Ghana and Nigeria were amongst the first African countries to gain independence. But because of a series of coups that actually bedeviled the countries, they were not able to actually grow economically and even socially and politically. So I think there has been an outside hand which has been very much determined to ensure that democracy in Africa does not take root. And ironically, these are the same people who talk about democracy, but they are the same ones behind the scenes who are funding coup plotters and ensuring that these countries fall into anarchy. Miriam, I think it is a high time Africa woke up from our slumber and we realize that we need to come up with structures of leadership which will be able to avert such interference from foreign powers. But also, as we talk about coups, we have seen coups that have been initiated by those in military and in government. But also another side of coups is those coups like what happened in Libya, like what happened in Egypt, like what happened in Tunisia, where foreign governments actually influence and incite civilians against legitimate leaders like Muammar Gaddafi. And later on, if the military does not offer them support, they actually deploy their own militaries from NATO and other Western powers to come and bombard a legitimate government until they are able to oust the leader or kill even the leader, like it happened in Libya, unfortunately. And then the country falls into anarchy. There's power vacuum, and these occasion civil strifes that we have been seeing across Africa. So even as we talk about coups by the military in Africa, we also have to understand that also the financials of these coups have also been directly taking their hand into ousting various leaders in African continents, something which is totally unacceptable, Miriam. I submit.
Very well. Back to you, Doc.
Yeah, thank you very much. Ambassador Maina is online from Paris. He wants to join. He has requested to join. From there, he is requested to join. But let me now pick it from where Wesonga has just left, and Tawish, and then I did not hear much about Sharon because I was interrupted by some call. I don't know what Sharon said. Miriam, could you recap a few things, what Sharon said?
Sharon, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, Miriam.
Yes.
There are a few points that you made. I was not able to pick them because I was interrupted by something. My network.
Yeah.